students. Let us learn a political science lesson today. That is understanding laws. For a country, is it democratic or non-democratic is not a matter. Every countries are in need of some rules and regulations. And every countries also will be having a capacity to make that rules and regulation acceptable to majority of its citizens. Whether the remaining section of the society is accepting or not is doesn't matter. Majority people of a country must accept the rule made by a country. So we are going to study about how rules and regulations are making for a nation. Who is in charge of making rules and regulations for a country? What is the need for new rules and regulations for a country, etc. So let us study all that points one by one today. We know the history of our own country from the past itself, where rules or laws were made by kings or queens or their elected members or their own supporters, and that rules and regulations were comfortable and favorable to the ruling class mainly. And there will be a kind of discrimination for the lower section or the higher section of a society or for a country itself. Rules were not equally applicable to all the people of that countries in early time. And while times going on, when the outsiders, that is the foreigners, came to India, when Britishers or under colonial rule also, India faced the same problem of inequality in rule. Rules made by the Britishers were really arbitrary. That we know that arbitrary rules are rules made by one section of administration alone, without having no any talk, without having no any discussion with another group of people. If a group of people alone are making rules comfortable to them, that is called arbitrary rules. So rules made by the Britishers were really exactly arbitrary. That's why number of confusions were there, lots of clashes were there, and a lot of people lost their life protesting against such rules made by the Britishers comfortable to them. So when here we can identify that when we got freedom, or just before itself, just before getting freedom of India, our national leaders were keeping an idea in their mind. Whenever we are getting freedom, whenever we are starting to make rules and regulations by the members of India itself, all rules must be equal to all people. Because we had lots of severe experiences under Britishers, or bitter experiences under Britishers in the form of discriminative rules. That means if a person from white community or from British community doing any crime, he will be having least punishment. And if an Indian doing the same crime, he will be having capital punishment. So two types of practices on the prepared rules were there in India under Britishers. So Indians believed, or Indians already hoped to make rules and regulations equally applicable to all its citizens. So here from the making rule by a government is very important. That is, every people or every citizen of its own country must be satisfied with the rules and regulations making by its own representative. So we can study that from the previous lessons we studied. One of the most important duty or function of parliament is to make laws. So that is what we are studying here. And whether the process of making a rule is easy, that is what we need to discuss here. We know that, just we told that all rules must be equal to all people. And that situation, when all people are equally treating by rules and laws, that is known as rule of law. And it is believing that during the time of Britishers, they introduced the rule of law here in India. But many critics are there, because major two reasons are there to say that Britishers were not the people who introduced the rule of law, because many of the rules made by the Britishers were favorable to them alone, and if anyone is violating or criticizing them, all those criticizing or opposing the rules or the decisions of the Britishers were put in jail and were severely punished. So such an act was introduced in 1870, that is called Sedition Act. As per Sedition Act, everyone, those who are criticizing the British government, will be came under arrest. So there is a kind of discrimination. That means those people having any freedom to criticize others need to obey everything. So it is one of the point to criticize the idea that Britishers were not the people who introduced the rule of law. And another reason why it is says that Britishers were not the one who introduced this rule of law, that Indian national movement under many leaders had their own ideas about to make rules and regulation representatives of all group of people needed. Such rules were not introduced during the period of Britishers. So it was not the Britishers, but after India's independence, we Indians introduced the same or practiced the same idea of rule of law in India. Because presently the parliament is in charge of making rules and regulation. And we know parliament is the elected body of representatives from different nook and corners of every religious or communities or all other sections. So, as our national freedom fighters believe, here we are practicing the idea of making rules by the elected representatives from all different sections of our country. So, it is possible to say that India following rule of law, where we can say that a rule or a law made by our parliament must be applicable to all section of society without having no any kind of positions in the society, or without having, or irrespective of their religious or language or cultural or educational or political or any other background. From the lower section, that is from the beginning, that means from person from the village level to the highest position, together has equal or same category under law. The President of India or a farmer or a tribal man or an educated officer, it doesn't matter, all are equal before law. That is known as rule of law. That is practicing in our country. Our constitution by 1950 January 26 itself made or prepared some written rules and regulations for our country. So almost every of the rules and regulations are preparing in our present India or from that time itself is mainly based on the constitution of our country itself. So, whenever changes happening in society, maybe economical or social or political, or in case of science and technology, sometimes the prepared rules by constitution in 1950 sometimes may not be sufficient to meet the demands of our present growing population. So, it is the duty of the present elected representatives of parliament to prepare new rules according to the choice or according to the demand of our society presently. That is a process where new rules or new discussions, new thoughts, etc. need to come together, need to discuss it in public, and also need to get the solutions or opinion from the public. Later only a new rule can be prepared. New rules are needed only whenever society or the people of a country demanding the same, only on the situation whenever it is important. That is, whenever changes happen, whenever total atmosphere of economical or political or cultural or religious or language or any kind of background is changing, sometimes some modifications or some new introductions may be needed in the laws prepared. So, in case if there is a new law needed to be prepared, that matter, that means in case of child labor or widow remarriage or in case of property, whatever it may be, doesn't matter, whenever situation is changing, some demands or some such situations will be there. According to meet the need of all such newly introduced situations or newly emerging situation, that particular point or that particular matter to be made as an issue for the public to talk and also to discuss. That is one of the first stage of making a new rule. That means a public talk is needed on that issue. And out of that public talk, that there will be some different suggestions or some opinions will be originated. That opinions need to be discussed in detail by different organizations or agencies or commissions or some representatives or elected body or whatever it may be. That is the third stage. Only after all these stages happen, there will be a common discussion about that matter in the public, that is in parliament. where Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha together will be there. Lok Sabha with its majority members from every corners of country will be having a talk or a discussion about that issue in public. So the common idea from different representatives will be emerged there, and it will be having a chance to make a proper decision, or a proper point will be prepared. That point or that idea will be written in the form of a bill, and that bill will be discussed in the Rajya Sabha once again. And if the majority of people in Rajya Sabha also agree upon the discussion made in Lok Sabha, it will be given to President of our country. When our President of our nation is signing over it, that discussion becomes a law. So stages and stages are there. No chance for getting a sudden or an immediate rule in a democratic nation, because we know that in order to make any new rule, there are many stages, especially in form of discussion with a group of people. That's why we are saying that Indian rules are not arbitrary, but Britishers made arbitrary rules. In India, in order to make a new rule, lots of discussion with lots of people from different corners are happening every time. Whenever all that discussions are becoming so hot and also so intensive, it will be a matter of discussion in the parliament. Then only a kind of change, whether it is to be rejected or to be accepted. If it is accepted and will be signed by the President of our nation, that discussion made by people from all nook and corners of our country and from different walk of life of people, etc., makes a law or becoming a law. So according to situations, it will be not possible to make a sudden rule. According to situation, when talks or discussions are going on in public, and when at last, after sometimes after many more months also will be taken, sometimes in case of such a important decisions, because that is to be a matter of acceptance from all corners of people. So at last, after conducting all these type of processes of discussions in every corners of country, at last we made a new rule. So people or the parliament is satisfied. Parliament is satisfied or government is satisfied. Sometimes if it is constitutionally accepted and also accepted or supported by majority of our parliament, sometimes in some situation some new rules made by parliament may become unpopular. That means people are not ready to accept it, mainly because of the bad or crooked intention behind introducing such a new rules to society. Maybe it is harmful, and also maybe a kind of alienation will be happen to people. So in such a situation, even though a rule made by parliament after all these stages or steps of discussions and debates in different corners, such unpopular rules may not be sometimes accepted by people. So whether what people can do in such a situation, we have some other roles that other than being a part of a nation as a voter alone, we citizen of a country also has their own role to play in such a critical situation, just like in the form of protest can be conducted. Whenever unpopular rules which will be harmful to the situation or for a particular community or for a particular language or some any other some kind of people, there is a chance for people to show their unwillingness to admit that rule in the form of protest. Protest may be of different type, may conduct, media will support the people, and different types of signature campaign can be conducted, public meetings can be conducted, interviews or talk through media is also possible, or at last people may be there in streets or in towns in the form of rallies or processions, etc. So whenever the dissatisfaction from the side of people is increasingly going on, it will be a chance for the parliament to have a rethink. That means something is went wrong when that new rule is prepared. Somebody or some group of people are really dissatisfied because of some bad intention behind the introduction of such a new rules. So in such a situation, other than being a passive member or a passive voter, people have their own freedom, as it is a democratic nation, to show our unwillingness in the form of different types of protest method. Constitutionally accepted protest methods can be possible. So it give a chance for the parliament to correct the mistakes whenever it is needed, and new changes will be there, modifications will be made in the new rule. Even though it is a new rule, if it is not accepting by people, modifications sometimes may be needed, or need to cancel that newly prepared rule, because rules must be for people. If it is to suppress the people of a nation, it should not be accepted by the people. Rules must be equally important, equally treated all group of people. That is what a democratic nation. So governments are there, parliament also is there, representatives are there, but whenever mistakes happen from the side of government, it is their duty to correct themselves and also to get the support of people to continue their administration, and also to keep or to maintain peace and security of the country and also the people of a nation. So making rule is exactly to ensure the integration, unity, equality, freedom of all the people of a citizen. Whenever mistakes happen, again it is the responsibility of the government to correct the mistake and also to seek the support of people to continue here. So the process of making rule is not an easy procedure, because everything must be constitutionally accepted. Constitution give base for every kind of new rules here. So based on constitutional provision, new rules and regulations are compulsory whenever some age-old rules are prevailing in our country, which are not suitable for our present situation. As our situation is, or society is changing according to the development that happen in science and technology, or in case of economical or in educational field. So whenever new rules needed, it must be created, and new rules or every rules must treat all group of people equally before law. That is rule of law, introduced in India by our own people. So the portion or the lesson that give details about understanding lawmaking is finished here. I think you all got whatever procedures are there in case of making a new rule here, and whatever steps are taken by government of our country, and what are the role of people whenever we are not accepting any kind of a new rule. So let us stop now. We will meet in the next class with another topic. So watch our videos, study well. Thank you. Have a nice day.